Section 8 of the works of Edgar Allan Poe, Raven Edition, Volume 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Simon Smoke. Why the Little Frenchman Wears His Hand in a Sling, Part 1 by Edgar Allan Poe.
It's on my visiting card, sure enough, and it's them that's all a pink satin paper that any gentleman places may behold the interesting words.
Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, 39 Southampton Row, Russell Square, Paris, Bloomsbury. And should you be waiting to discover who is the pink of politeness quite, and the lighter of the hot ton in the whole city of London, why, it's just myself. And faith, that same is no wonder at all. So be pleased to stop curling your nose. For every inch of the 6 weeks that I've been a gentleman, and left out with the backthroating to take up with the baronetcy, it's Patrick that's been living like a holy emperor and getting the education and the graces.
Yeah.
And would it be a blessed thing for your spirits if you could lay your 2 papers just upon Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, when he's already dressed for the opera, or stepping into the bresky for the drive into the Hyde Park? But it's the elegant big figure that I have, for the ration of which all the ladies fall in love with me. Isn't it my own sweet self now that'll measure the 6 foot, and the 3 inches more nor that, in my stockings, and that I'm exceedingly well proportioned all over to match? And it is really more than 3 foot and a bit that there is, anyhow, of the little old foreigner Frenchman that lives just over the way, and that's a-ogling and a-goggling the whole day, and bad luck to him. And the poorty witty Mr. Trackle, that's my own next-door neighbour, God bless her, and a most particular friend and acquaintance. You perceive the little spalpeen is summoned down in the mouth, and wears his left hand in a sling. And it's for that same thing, by your love, that I'm going to give you the good reason. The truth of the whole matter is just simple enough. For the very first day that I come from Connaught, and showed my sweet little self in the street to the widdy, who was looking through the window, it was a gone case altogether with the heart of the purty Mistress Trackle. I perceived it, you see, all at once, and no mistake, and that's God's truth. First of all, it was up with the window in a jiffy, and then she threw open her 2 papers to the utmost, and then it was a little gold spy-glass that she clapped tight to one of them, and divil may burn me if I didn't speak to me as plain as a paper could speak. And says it through the spy-glass, "Ooch, the tip of the morning to ye, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, Mavornin. And it's a nae gentleman that ye are, sure enough, and it's myself that me Ford and Gist that'll be at your service, dear, any time o' day, at all, for the asking. And it's not myself ye would have to be bating the politeness, so I made her a bow that would have broken your heart altogether to behold, and then I pulled aff me hat with a flourish, and then I winked at her hard with both eyes, as much as to say, true for you, ye sweet little creature, Mrs. Trackle, me darling, and I wish I may be drowned dead in a bog, if it's not myself, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, that'll make a whole bushel o' laugh to your ladyship in the twinkling o' the eye of a Londonderry purity.
And it was the next morning, sure, just as I was making up me mind whether it wouldn't be the polite thing to send a bit o' writing to the widdy by way of a love letter, when up come the delivery servant with an elegant card, and he told me that the name on it, for I never could read the copperplate printing on account of being left-handed, was all about Monsieur the Count, a goose, Lucchese, Major de Downs, and that the whole of the devilish lingo was the Spalpini long name of the little old foreigner Frenchman as lived over the way. And just with that in come the little William himself, and then he made me a broth of a bow, and then he said he had only taken the liberty of doing me the honour of giving me a call, and then he went on to palaver at a great rate, and divil a bit did I comprehend what he would be after the telling me at all, excepting and saving that he said "Pully woe, woolly woe," and told me, among a bushel o' lies, bad luck to him, that he was mad for the love of my widdy Mistress Trackle, and that my widdy Mrs. Trackle had a punch for him. At the hearing of this, ye may swear, though, I was as mad as a grasshopper, but I remembered that I was Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, and that it wasn't altogether gentle to let the anger get the upper hand o' the politeness. So I made light o' the matter, and kept dark, and got quite sociable with the little chap, and after a while, what did he do but ask me to go with him to the widdy's, saying he would give me the fashionable introduction to her ladyship. "Is it there ye are?" said I then to myself, "and it's true for you, Patrick, that's ye're the fortunatest mortal in life. We'll soon see now whether it's your swate self, or whether it's little Monsieur Maître de Dons that Mistress Trackle is head and ears in the love with." With that we went aft to the widdy's next door, and ye may well say it was an elegant place. So it was. There was a carpet all over the floor, and in one corner there was a 40-penny, and a Jew's harp, and the devil knows what else, and in another corner was a Sophie, the beautifulest thing in all nature, and sitting on the Sophie, sure enough, there was the swate little angel, Mistress Trackle. "The tip o' the morning to ye," says I, "Mrs. Trackle." And then I made such an elegant obeisance that you would ha' quite altogether bewildered the brain o' ye. "Willy-woo, pully-woo, plump in the mud," says the little foreigner Frenchman. And sure, Mrs. Trackle, says he, that he did. "Isn't this gentleman here just his reverence Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, and isn't he altogether and entirely the most particular friend and acquaintance that I have in the whole world?" And with that the widdy, she gets up from the Sophie, and makes the sweetest curtsy nor ever was seen, and then down she sits like an angel. And then, by the powers, it was that little spalpeen, Monsieur Maître de Dons, that plumped hisself right down by the right side of her. Och! I expected the 2 eyes o' me would ha' come out of my head on the spot. I was so desperate mad. However, "Bait who?" says I, after a while. "Is it there ye are, Monsieur Maître de Dons?" And so down I plumbed on the left side of her ladyship, to be even with the villain. Botheration! It would have done your heart good to perceive the elegant double wink that I gave her just then right in the face, with both eyes. But the little old Frenchman, he never began to suspect me at all, and desperate-hearted was he made the love to her ladyship. Woolly-woo, says he, pulley-woo, says he, plumping them up, says he. That's all to no use, Monsieur Frog, Mavourneen, thinks I, and I talked as hard and fast as I could all the while, and thought it was myself just that devoured her ladyship completely and entirely, by reason of the elegant conversation that I keep up with her all about the dear box of Connaught. And by she give me such a sweet smile from one end of her mouth to the other, that it made me as bold as a pig, and I just took hold of the end of her little finger in the most delicatest manner in nature, looking at her all the while out o' the whites of my eyes. And then only perceived the cuteness of the sweet angel, for no sooner did she observe that I was after the squeezing of her flipper than she up with in a jiffy and put it away behind her back, just as much as to say, "Now then, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, there's a better chance for ye, Mavourneen, for it's not altogether the gentle thing to be after the squeezing of my flipper right full in the sides of that little foreign Frenchman, Monsieur Maitre Didon's." With that I gived her a big wink, just to say, "Let Sir Patrick alone for the likes o' them tricks," and then I went easy to work, and you'd have died with the devotion to behold how cleverly I slipped my right arm between the back of the sofa and the back of her ladyship, and there, sure enough, I found a sweet little flipper all waiting to say, "The tip o' the morning to ye, Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet." And wasn't it myself, sure, that just gived it the least little bit of squeeze in the world, all in the way of a commencement, and not to be too rough with her ladyship. And oh, botheration, wasn't it the gentlest and delicatest of all the little squeezes that I got in return? Blood and thunder, Sir Patrick, Mavourneen, thinks I to myself, fate, it's just the mother's son of you, and nobody else at all, that's the handsomest and the fortunatest young buck-throtter that ever comed out of Connaught. And with that I give the flipper a big squeeze, and a big squeeze it was, by the powers, that her ladyship give to me back. But it would have split the seven sides of you with the laughing to behold, just then all at once, the conceited behaviour of Monsieur Maitre Didon's. The likes o' such a jabbering and a smirking and a parley-wooing as he began with her ladyship never was known before upon earth, and devil may burn me if it wasn't me own very two peepers that cotched him tipping her the wink out of one eye. Oh, if it wasn't myself then that was mad as a Kilkenny cat, I should like to be told who it was. "Let me inform you, Monsieur Maitre Didon's," said I, as pearl-eyed as ever ye seed, "that is not the gentle thing at all, and not for the likes o' you, anyhow, to be after the ogling and a goggling at her ladyship in that fashion." And just with that such another squeeze as it was, I gived her flipper all as much as to say, "Isn't Sir Patrick now, my jewel, that'll be able to the protecting o' you, my darling?" And then there comed another squeeze back, all by way of the answer, "True for you, Sir Patrick." It said as plain as ever a squeeze said in the world, "True for you, Sir Patrick, Mavourneen, and it's a proper, neat gentleman ye are, that's God's truth." And with that she opened her two beautiful peepers till I beloved they would have comed out of her head altogether and entirely, and she looked first as mad as a cat at Monsieur Frog, and then as smiling as all out o' doors at myself. Then, and a woolly-woo, pulley-woo, And then with that he shoved up his 2 shoulders till the devil the bit of his head was to be discovered, and then he let down the 2 corners of his purty trap, and then not a ha'porth more of the satisfaction could I get out o' the spalpeen. Believe me, my jewel, it was Sir Patrick that was unreasonable mad thin, and the more by token that the Frenchman kept and wit his winking at the widdy, and the widdy she kept and wit the squeezing of my flipper, as much as to say, at him against Sir Patrick O'Grandison, my warning. So I just ripped out with a big oath, and says I, ye little spalpeeny frock of a bog-throtting son of a bloody noun! And just then, what do you think it was that her ladyship did? Trot, she jumped off from the sofa as if she was bit, and made off to the door, while I turned my head round after her, in a complete bewilderment and botheration, and followed her with me 2 peepers. You perceive I had a reason of my own for knowing that she couldn't get down the stairs altogether and entirely, for I knew very well that I had hold of her hand, for the devil the bit had I ever let it go. And says I, isn't it the last little bit of a mistake in the world that you've been after the making, your ladyship? Come back now, that's your darling, and I'll give ye your flipper. But off she went down the stairs like a shot, and then I turned round to the little French foreigner. If it wasn't his spalpeeny little pot that I had hold of in my own, why then it wasn't. That's all. And maybe it wasn't myself that just died then outright with laughing to behold the little chap when he found out that it wasn't the widdy at all that he had hold of all the time, but only Sir Patrick O'Grandison. The old devil himself never beheld such a long face as he pet. And as for Sir Patrick O'Grandison, Baronet, it wasn't for the likes of his reverence to be after the minding of a trifle of a mistake. Ye may just say, though, for it's God truth, that afore I left hold of the flipper of the spalpeen, which was not till after her ladyship's footman had kicked us both down the stairs, I give it such a neat little broth of a squeeze as made it all up into raspberry jam. Woolly-woo, says he, pulley-woo, says he, God-damn! And that's just the truth of the reason why he wears his left hand in a sling. Bon-bon. Quand un bon vin meuble mon estomac, je suis plus savant que Balzac, plus sage que Pibrac. Mon bras seul faisant l'attaque de la nation coséaque, la m'étroite au sac de Charon, je passerai le lac, en dormant dans son bac, je roi au fier et hac, sans que mon cœur fit tic ni tac, pressante du tabac. French vaudeville. That Pierre Bon-Bon was a restaurateur of uncommon qualifications, no man who, during the reign of, frequented the little café in the cul-de-sac Lefebvre at Rouen, will I imagine feel himself at liberty to dispute. That Pierre Bon-Bon was, in an equal degree, skilled in the philosophy of that period is, I presume, still more especially undeniable. His pattes à la fois were beyond doubt immaculate, but what pen can do justice to his essay sur la nature, his thoughts sur l'âme, his observations sur l'esprit? If his omelettes, if his fricandeaux were inestimable, what littérateur of that day would not have given twice as much for an idée de bonbon as for all the trace of idée of all the rest of the savants? Bon-Bon had ransacked libraries which no other man had ransacked, had more than any other would have entertained a notion of reading, had understood more than any other would have conceived the possibility of understanding, and although While he flourished, there were not wanting some authors at Rouen to assert that his dicta evinced neither the purity of the Academy nor the depth of the Lyceum. Although, mark me, his doctrines were by no means very generally comprehended, still it did not follow that they were difficult of comprehension. It was, I think, on account of their self-evidency that many persons were led to consider them abstruse. It is to Bon-Bon, but let this go no farther. It is to Bon-Bon that Kant himself is mainly indebted for his metaphysics. The former was indeed not a Platonist, nor strictly speaking an Aristotelian, nor did he, like the modern Leibniz, waste those precious hours which might be employed in the invention of a fricassee or facili gradu, the analysis of a sensation, in frivolous attempts at reconciling the obstinate oils and waters of ethical discussion. Not at all. Bon-Bon was Ionic. Bon-Bon was equally Italic. He reasoned a priori. He reasoned also a posteriori. His ideas were innate or otherwise. He believed in George of Trebizond. He believed in Bossarion. Bessarion. Bon-Bon was emphatically a Bonbonist. I have spoken of the philosopher in his capacity of restaurateur. I would not, however, have any friend of mine imagine that in fulfilling his hereditary duties in that line, our hero wanted a proper estimation of their dignity and importance. Far from it. It was impossible to say in which branch of his profession he took the greater pride. In his opinion, the powers of the intellect held intimate connection with the capabilities of the stomach. I am not sure, indeed, that he greatly disagreed with the Chinese, who held that the soul lies in the abdomen. The Greeks, at all events, were right, he thought, who employed the same word for the mind and the diaphragm. Note 1, M.D. By this I do not mean to insinuate a charge of gluttony, or indeed any other serious charge to the prejudice of the metaphysician. If Pierre Bon-Bon had his failings, and what great man has not 1,000? If Pierre Bon-Bon, I say, had his failings, they were failings of very little importance. Faults, indeed, which, in other tempers, have often been looked upon rather in the light of virtues. As regards one of these foibles, I should not even have mentioned it in this history, but for the remarkable prominency, the extreme alto rilievo, in which it jutted out from the plane of his general disposition. He could never let slip an opportunity of making a bargain. Not that he was avaricious, no. It was by no means necessary to the satisfaction of the philosopher that the bargain should be to his own proper advantage. Provided a trade could be effected, a trade of any kind, upon any terms, or under any circumstances. A triumphant smile was seen for many days thereafter to enlighten his countenance, and a knowing wink of the eye to give evidence of his sagacity. At any epoch it would not be very wonderful if a humour so peculiar as the one I have just mentioned should elicit attention and remark. At the epoch of our narrative, had this peculiarity not attracted observation, there would have been room for wonder indeed. It was soon reported that upon all occasions of the kind, the smile of Bon-Bon was wont to differ widely from the downright grin with which he would laugh at his own jokes, or welcome an acquaintance. Hints were thrown out of an exciting nature. Stories were told of perilous bargains made in a hurry, and repented of at leisure. And instances were adduced of unaccountable capacities, vague longings, and unnatural inclinations implanted by the author of all evil for wise purposes of his own. The philosopher had other weaknesses, but they are scarcely worthy our serious examination. For example, there are few men of extraordinary profundity who are found wanting in an inclination for the bottle.
Whether this inclination be an exciting cause, or rather a valid proof of such profundity, it is a nice thing to say. Bon-Bon, as far as I can learn, did not think the subject adapted to minute investigation. Nor do I. Yet, in the indulgence of a propensity so truly classical, it is not to be supposed that the restaurateur would lose sight of the intuitive discrimination which was wont to characterize, at one and the same time, his essays and his omelettes. In his seclusions the vin de Bourgogne had its allotted hour, and there were appropriate moments for the Côte du Rhône, which in Sauterne was to Medoc what Catullus was to Homer. He would sport with a syllogism in sipping Saint-Péray, but unravel an argument over Claude de Vougeot, and upset a theory in a torrent of Chambertin. Well, had it been if the same quick sense of propriety had attended him in the peddling propensity to which I have formerly alluded. But this was by no means the case. Indeed, to say the truth, that trait of mind in the philosophic Bon-Bon did begin at length to assume a character of strange intensity and mysticism, and appeared deeply tinctured with the diablerie of his favourite German studies. To enter the little café in the cul-de-sac Lefebvre was at the period of our tale to enter the sanctum of a man of genius. Bon-Bon was a man of genius. There was not a sous-cuisinière in Rouen who could not have told you that Bon-Bon was a man of genius. His very cat knew it, and forbore to whisk her tail in the presence of the man of genius. His large water-dog was acquainted with the fact, and, upon the approach of his master, betrayed his sense of inferiority by a sanctity of deportment, a debasement of the ears, and a dropping of the lower jaw, not altogether unworthy of a dog. It is, however, true that much of this habitual respect might have been attributed to the personal appearance of the metaphysician. A distinguished exterior will, I am constrained to say, have its way even with a beast, and I am willing to allow much in the outward manner of the restaurateur calculated to impress the imagination of the quadruped. There is a peculiar majesty about the atmosphere of the little grates, if I may be permitted so equivocal an expression, which mere physical bulk alone will be found at all times inefficient in creating. If, however, Bon-Bon was barely 3 feet in height, and if his head was diminutively small, still it was impossible to behold the rotundity of his stomach without a sense of magnificence nearly bordering upon the sublime. In its size both dogs and men must have seen a type of his acquirements. In its immensity, a fitting habitation for his immortal soul. I might here, if it so pleased me, dilate upon the matter of habiliment and other mere circumstances of the external metaphysician. I might hint that the hair of our hero was worn short, combed smoothly over his forehead, and surmounted by a conical-shaped white flannel cap and tassels. That his pea-green jerkin was not after the fashion of those worn by the common class of restaurateurs at that day, that the sleeves were something fuller than the reigning costume permitted, that the cuffs were turned up, not as usual in that barbarous period, with cloth of the same quality and colour as the garment, but faced in a more fanciful manner with the parti-coloured velvet of Genoa. That his slippers were of a bright purple, curiously filigreed, and might have been manufactured in Japan but for the exquisite pointing of the toes and the brilliant tints of the binding and embroidery. That his breeches were of the yellow satin-like material called amiable. That his sky-blue cloak, resembling in form a dressing wrapper, and richly bestudded all over with crimson devices, floated cavalierly upon his shoulders like a mist of the morning. And that his stout ensemble gave rise to the remarkable words of Benevenuta,
the improvisatrice of Florence, that it was difficult to say whether Pierre Bon-Bon was indeed a bird of paradise, or rather a very paradise of perfection. I might, I say, expatiate upon all these points if I pleased, but I forbear. Merely personal details may be left to historical novelists. They are beneath the moral dignity of matter of fact. I have said that to enter the café in the cul-de-sac Lefebvre was to enter the sanctum of a man of genius. But then it was only the man of genius who could duly estimate the merits of the sanction. A sign consisting of a vast folio swung before the entrance. On one side of the volume was painted a bottle, on the reverse a pate. On the back were visible in large letters, "Œuvre de Bon-Bon." Thus was delicately shadowed forth the twofold occupation of the proprietor. Upon stepping over the threshold, the whole interior of the building presented itself to view. A long, low-pitched room of antique construction was indeed all the accommodation afforded by the café. In a corner of the apartment stood the bed of the metaphysician. An army of curtains, together with a canopy à la grecque, gave it an air at once classic and comfortable. In the corner, diagonally opposite, appeared in direct family communion the properties of the kitchen and the bibliothèque. A dish of polemics stood peacefully upon the dresser. Here lay an ovenful of the latest ethics, there a kettle of dudecimo mélanges. Volumes of German morality were hand in glove with the gridiron. A toasting fork might be discovered by the side of Eusebius. Plato reclined at his ease in the frying pan, and contemporary manuscripts were filed away upon the spit. In other respects, the Café de Bon-Bon might be said to differ little from the usual restaurants of the period. A fireplace yawned opposite the door. On the right of the fireplace an open cupboard displayed a formidable array of labelled bottles. It was here, about 12 o'clock one night, during the severe winter, the comments of his neighbours upon his singular propensity, that Pierre Bon-Bon, I say, having turned them all out of his house, locked the door upon them with an oath, and betook himself in no very pacific mood to the comforts of a leather-bottomed armchair and a fire of blazing faggots. It was one of those terrific nights which are only met with once or twice during a century. It snowed fiercely, and the house tottered to its centre with the floods of wind that, rushing through the crannies in the wall and pouring impetuously down the chimney, shook awfully the curtains of the philosopher's bed, and disorganized the economy of his paid pans and papers. The huge folio sign that swung without, exposed to the fury of the tempest, creaked ominously and gave out a moaning sound from its stanchions of solid oak. End of section 8. Recording by Simon Smoke.